Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a really fascinating text today, a sermon by Tony Yestein called The One God. We're going to objectively unpack its pretty striking arguments about divine love, human destiny, and the afterlife. It's a piece that completely challenges how traditional doctrines view judgment and mercy. So let's get right into it.
First up, I want you to chew on this question straight from the text. Does divine love have an expiration date? It's a brilliant hook. Right from the jump, the source sets up this massive tension between traditional, fear-based religious doctrines, the ones warning of endless torment, and a much broader vision of a restorative mercy that literally never gives up on a soul.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering the universal love argument, rethinking eternal torment, divine correction, building compassionate communities, and wrapping up with the final restoration.
Starting with Section 1, the universal love argument and the idea of one eternal source.
To really grasp the argument here, we have to look at the core concept the sermon proposes, which is universal restoration. Basically, this is the theological belief that humanity's ultimate destiny isn't endless torment, but total, complete reconciliation with the divine. Yestein is arguing for an all-loving reality where absolutely no soul, no nation, and no sinner is ever beyond care or ultimate healing. According to the text, divine love simply doesn't create souls just for them to suffer endlessly.
And the sermon pushes back hard against tribalism, stating, God is not a possession. God is the possessor of all. The author points out this tragic historical habit we have, where human beings take the infinite and kind of shrink it down to make it a mascot for our own group's superiority. We love to say God is with us, but as the text notes, too often what we really mean is just God is against them.
Moving on to Section 2, rethinking torment and exploring infinite mercy.
To give context to its argument against eternal suffering, the sermon tops impartially into some long-standing historical debates about corrective mercy. It actually lists out times when religion was weaponized by institutions. We're talking about times when doctrine was used to defend slavery, deny dignity to women, bless conquests, or use sheer terror to control people's souls. The author makes the case that humanity has a sacred responsibility to let its conscience challenge these ideas when they just don't align with an all-loving creator.
And this brilliantly illustrates the philosophical core of the source. We can compare these two ideas directly. On one side, you have eternal torment, which is entirely retributive. The sermon argues that this approach simply cages evil forever, meaning the sinner basically remains a sinner for eternity. But on the flip side, divine restoration is restorative. The text argues this approach actually destroys evil by fundamentally transforming the human heart, healing the very things that history itself couldn't fix.
Section 3, divine correction, where we look at judgment as healing. Now, a natural follow-up question is, well, what about accountability? The text uses a really punchy metaphor here. Judgment is surgery. So the sermon absolutely does not dismiss judgment. Instead, it frames divine judgment as this cleansing fire that burns away the chains holding a person down, rather than burning the soul itself. It's like a bright light exposing the disease so that actual healing can finally begin. The source breaks down exactly how this judgment works. It views it as the revelation of absolute truth, that exact moment when lies just can't hide anymore. It's a purification process where oppressors are completely stripped of their illusions. Basically, the selfish and the violent finally have to inescapably encounter and feel the full weight of the suffering they caused. So yes, accountability is very real here, but the ultimate goal is always transformation.
The text captures this beautifully with the line, God's judgment is mercy burning away falsehood. Yestein uses this super relatable analogy of a loving parent. A loving parent will correct their child, teach them, maybe even discipline them, but they would never, ever desire their child's endless, eternal agony. The argument is, if the best human parents wouldn't do that, why would we attribute that to the divine?
Let's pivot to Section 4, compassionate communities and the practical application of all this.
This leads us to what might honestly be the most striking observation in the entire text. It is easy to reject hell in doctrine while practicing hell in our relationships. The sermon is giving a massive warning here against spiritual arrogance. It's essentially saying, hey, it's not enough to just hold progressive, universal beliefs in your head if you're actively abandoning, judging, and speaking with contempt about the people around you in reality.
So the text lays out specific mandates for how to actually live this out. First, live without spiritual arrogance. That means treating the cashier, your neighbor, or even that incredibly irritating person online as someone held in divine love. Second, stop weaponizing religion. Third, become healers, right now, in the present. Because if you believe God heals in eternity, you've got to help the hungry and hurting today. And fourth, allow yourself to be loved, recognizing that even with all your own failures, you are not the exception to this universal mercy. Now, what's really interesting here is how the sermon categorizes human motivations in spiritual communities. It contrasts two models. Fear-based religion runs entirely on anxiety. It's always asking things like, who is outside, or how do I prove I am better? But love-based spirituality fundamentally changes the questions we ask. It focuses outward and upward, asking, how can the lost be brought home, and how can I serve?
And finally, Section 5, the final restoration, and the concept of God all in all. God all in all. The sermon really pauses on this ancient phrase as one of the most beautiful visions for the human spirit. It proposes that the ultimate vision of the universe isn't one divided forever between the saved and the damned. Rather, it's a completely harmonious reality, fully reconciled in divine light. The text uses this great analogy of a choir. A choir isn't beautiful because every single voice sings the exact same note in sameness. It's beautiful because wonderfully different voices join together into one harmonious song.
To conclude our explainer today, I want to leave you with a really provocative thought derived directly from the core themes of the sermon. If the fear of eternal punishment were completely removed from your worldview, how would you choose to live today? Would your devotion weaken, or would it actually be purified? It challenges us to deeply reflect on our own motivations for goodness, asking whether we do good merely to dodge a penalty, or because love and compassion are simply the most beautiful ways to exist. Thanks for joining us.